shut the doors and you can't get out. Cool. Should we get started? Hey, I'm Tony. My talk is called Do Switch Quick, Get Rich Quick. That is kind of why you've all come into this quite dark room on a lovely sunny day. That was the original title of the talk, but I came up with a better one that I didn't think I could get past Susan Marshall. So please set your phones to silent and set them for, if you're having sales problems, not for bad for you, son. Got 99 problems, switch ain't one. Unbelievable. Right, but then stop. Who is this man and why should I care? I am Tony. Like I said, I'm a game developer from Edinburgh. I will mostly be kind of standing here because I've got quite a lot of slides to get through. I've been indie developer for 3 years now. I've been a game developer for about 18 years. I have done, in my recent time, I've done a bunch of Switch games, some of which, unfortunately, I can't show you, so that makes this slide look kind of underwhelming. So the first game that we ported was Binaries. It was our own game. It was a 2D, well, it is a 2D puzzle platform game. The second game that we ported was Subsurface Circular for Mike Bithell of Mike Bithell Games. Yes, and then there's some others. There are actually more than that we're working on at the moment and that we have got just ready for release, but for tiresome legal reasons I can't really go on about them. But I thought I would put them there just so you didn't think that I was just talking about experience of 2 games. So yes, before we kind of properly get started, there are some notes. Everyone likes notes. I am mainly a Unity developer, not even really a coder, to be honest. I think I was mocked on this stage yesterday for my lack of coding ability. So yeah, like anything that I kind of talk about in tech terms is pretty much going to be Unity based. I'm going to try and keep stuff quite abstracted rather than kind of going into too much kind of technical detail, because I know obviously some people are using their own engine, some people are using Unreal, all of that kind of stuff. The second point is this is kind of an indie scale talk. It is about Switch porting for indies. So like if you're here to find out how best to port Fallout 4 to the Switch, that's not really something I'm going to be able to help you with or tell you about. So this is, yeah, really about kind of relatively small scale games. I'm not a coder, as I mentioned, but on the plus side, this not a coder has ported and released some games on Switch, so that should kind of give you hope if you are also not a coder. And related to those kind of previous points, multiplayer is a massive wildcard that I have not had any experience with, so if your game is heavily multiplayer, I also don't really understand multiplayer. I don't like playing with other people. It's rubbish. All games should be single player. That's my quote for the GI Biz website. Second page of notes. I hope you like lists. This is pretty much the format of this talk. There are a lot of lists. Like I said, I'm going to kind of stand here and go through a lot of slides, which also stops me from sitting on the lovely, comfortable seating over there, unfortunately. Switcheroos is the term for people that play games on Switch, or at least that is the term that I'm trying to get people to use. And it's really sunny outside. I think still, I wrote this when it was really sunny outside, so I'm going to kind of try and quite quickly blast through these slides, and then we can all just leave and go back to the bar. Why would I be bothered about porting to Switch? I'm going to put that voice on every time you ask a question. That is my audience voice. I mean, so obviously that's quite a weird question for you to ask when you've come into a talk about Switch porting. I don't know why you would ask that one. But fine, let's talk about what the opportunity is and why you would even bother doing Switch porting, aside from the general kind of game developer joy of seeing your own game on a Nintendo console. So kind of just a quick look at how many consoles there are in the world. PlayStation 4, as far as I understand it, has about 70 million, from some numbers that I quickly googled up. I realise at this point I have absolutely ruined this game of play your cards right, because that bad goes all the way along. So obviously the next one is lower. Xbox One, Microsoft don't seem to actually talk about how many Xboxes there are, so probably not as many as PlayStation. This is based on some numbers that a man from EA said and probably got into a lot of trouble about. Switch has about 10 million, so obviously much smaller install base than the other consoles, but it has only been out for a year. And it's doing a lot better than generally people expected. I mean, I think at the time when the Switch kind of was announced and came out, everyone laughed at the funny video of all of the people playing it in lots of different ways, and everyone kind of expected it to maybe do a bit of a Wii U, but it hasn't done that. And so everyone has really quickly kind of dived on the idea of, quick, let's try and get all of our games on the Switch. So to look at kind of how many games there are on the platforms, like how many people you're going to be competing with. I'm not going to do this one point by point because it's kind of about the same sort of thing. So when I looked on the Switch, on the Nintendo Europe website earlier on, there are about 700 games on the Switch at the moment. There's obviously a lot more coming out. Like I said, they're kind of everyone is hammering their stuff out, and Nintendo yesterday announced that they really want to release about 20 or 30 games a week, which is a lot of games. So we're kind of in a position now where like the kind of gold rush of like literally anything, like if you put literally anything on the Switch, it'll do great numbers. That's kind of past now, but it's still like the visibility is there, and I'll kind of chat a little bit more about the visibility later on. Obviously there is another platform that is missing from that. Steam has quite a lot of games on it. There are just too many games on Steam, really. Yes. 23,000, I think, was roughly the number that I counted them all. About 7,500 released last year, according to Steam Spy, that's more than all of the other consoles kind of put together. And it's speeding up, because Valve will just let literally anyone release games these days. And I'm kind of not really one of these sort of zero-sum indie-pocalypse kind of people, but obviously, visibility-wise, if you're competing against less stuff, like there's kind of more stoppage visibility there for you. And so, yeah, so kind of in the first year of Switch, we ended up with like a lot of headlines, like this kind of headline, of how a Switch release of a thing sold a lot better than literally every other platform of it combined. 2 more games there that did really well for their developers, but obviously both these headlines are kind of about 9 months ago, so you might be sort of sat there thinking, well, what's the state of play now? That was last week. So yeah, I mean, it's still kind of going on. Like I say, we're at a situation where if you release a game on Switch, like you have to put a bit of effort into it now. Like you can't just put literally anything on the store and expect loads of people to buy it and it to do great numbers. But if you're one of the actual kind of indie developers that sensibly does a little bit of PR and marketing and outreach and all of that kind of stuff, you can reasonably expect to do quite well. So for example, Binaries, our 2D puzzle platform game, apart from my friends in the audience, has anyone heard of my game Binaries? One person, good. Yeah, so Binaries is pretty much a definition of like a really unknown indie game, yet the Switch version did pretty well, sold more copies than on any other format, and that's considering things like Xbox One has had, it was on Games with Gold or something like that. The Steam versions had some quite deep discounting and holiday periods and that kind of stuff, and the Switch version has still comfortably outsold them all. I can't show you actual numbers, and I can't show you revenue numbers, and I also can't tell you what Subsurface Circular has done, because I don't want Mike Biffle of Mike Biffle Games to get cross with me. But every time I speak to Mike Biffle of Mike Biffle Games, he's very happy with how it's gone. So I think it can be sort of assumed that it has done well compared to the PC, and particularly the iPad version. I shouldn't have started doing a voice on this, should I? Okay, fine. So, how do I get my excellent game on the Switch? Yeah, change the tune now. Steps to massive indie profits, TM. First of all, create a Nintendo developer account. You can literally just go on Nintendo's website and sign up as a developer. This will give you access to the 3DS tools and to the Wii U tools. It will not give you access to the Switch tools. I mean, yeah, so you could kind of do this right now on your phone if I hadn't already told you to switch your phone off. You need to find the right person to talk to. This is actually the really tricky step, because this person is very elusive. It used to be a lovely man called Ed, and then he left, and now nobody seems to know who it is that you're meant to talk to, unfortunately. I would strongly recommend emailing Nintendo of Europe. There's like a developer, like publishing email account. You can email them, and basically like with like some materials about your game, especially like if it's previously been released, and say, hey, I want to bring this onto the Switch. And then they tick a little box on their back end that enables you for Switch porting. Like it lets you see all of the Switch bits of their website. And their website is great, by the way. If you are used to the PlayStation or Xbox or even Steam backends, be prepared for a lovely surprise, because Nintendo's website, developer website, is great. So yeah, then you go onto their website, download the SDK downloader thing, it will install a bunch of stuff for you. Again, it is lovely. I'm not just saying that in case Nintendo are in the room. Then you buy a test kit. I can't tell you how expensive test kits are, but they are not particularly expensive. I'm certainly not going to tell you while I'm mic'd up. Come to the bar and buy me a drink later and I'll tell you how much they cost. Yeah, so you buy a test kit. The turnaround for getting hold of test kits now is really quite short. When I got my first one about a year ago, it took about 8 weeks. But these days they turn up in about 1 week from you putting in the original order, presuming that you pay your invoice quickly. The test kits are essentially like retail hardware, which is, I think, why they had trouble kind of shipping them out to start off with, because like there wasn't very many Switches in the shops for actual people to buy. And then the final step, the all-important final step, do the porting. Notice on this, there is no concept approval step. So if you're the man that's been emailing me telling me, no, definitely my publisher says that there is definitely concept approval on the Switch, your publisher is lying to you. There is no concept approval. There is developer approval, obviously, so you've got to kind of find the right person to talk to and get approved. But once you are approved, you can just go crazy and release all of your back catalogue if you so wish, and lots of developers do wish. I am a genius coder, but if I wasn't, is there anything I could do to make porting easier? I don't know why that guy's developed a slight Geordie accent. I'm also not a genius coder, as I mentioned. Binaries took 2 weeks for me to port, and, well, not even 2 weeks. It was actually 2 weeks, but I had a 4-day weekend in the middle of it. Yes, living the indie lifestyle. Can take off anytime I want. In part, that was down to some kind of good choices or lucky choices that were made during development of the PC and Xbox versions, and I will now share with you some of those choices, how to make porting a bit easier. Split up your saving routines, and I think kind of if you've ported other stuff to consoles, like this is all just kind of general advice I've since been told. So you separate out your saving so that you do the data processing part of the saving separate from the actual kind of save routines. So luckily with our game, we already had the saving was streaming out like all of the variables into a binary stream, I think it's called, which I thought was kind of funny given the game was called binaries. And then that, luckily enough, that turns out to be the kind of the routine that you need to use for saving stuff on the Switch. In terms of user management, the Switch actually makes stuff really easy. So if you're used to, for example, the Xbox stuff where it's like you've got to deal with people doing stupid stuff like signing out in the middle of the game or the house setting on fire and that kind of stuff, you don't really have to deal with that on the Switch because it has. So if you've got a Switch, you've probably noticed pretty much every Switch game, when you first boot it up, it forces you to select a user profile. So you can, at that point, you can essentially assume the player is logged in as that user for the rest of their time. And also because the Switch has got a battery in it, I guess, you don't have to worry about people's houses setting on fire. They can take the Switch with them if it's in the middle of saving. Don't use player prefs. So yeah, this is very Unity specific, but please don't use player prefs. They will pretend to work, but they will not work. They only save kind of during a single session. So if you switch the game off and switch it back on again, none of that stuff is actually saved. Yes, so with several titles. So this seems to be kind of a thing a lot of indies do. If you're kind of just putting together like a PC game or whatever, people are kind of a little bit relaxed about like, oh yeah, player prefs just work, I'll just fire stuff around all over the place. So sometimes you will kind of have to go through all of your code and yeah, like kind of put all of your saving stuff into one place. And then abstract your inputs. So don't hardcode like your input stuff. So it's like don't have it so that you're like checking specific key presses, that kind of stuff. Try and abstract everything out into a class. Again, if you're on Unity, I would heavily recommend using something like the asset Rewired, which does a lot of this kind of stuff for you. And Rewired also supports Switch, so it's literally plug in and play. If you're porting a game that has already been on another console, you probably already have controller input set up, like joypad input set up. If you're porting a PC-only game, a lot of people seem to just use mouse and keyboard on PC, so you might not have the control stuff set up, and that can be quite a lot of work. So on Subsurface Circular, like the vast majority of the porting work on that was taking a mouse-driven game and basically making it so that it's got controller input through all of the menus. And in particular, again, Unity has a delightful feature where if you click the mouse, it will take focus away from whichever button was highlighted by the controller and not to give it back. So you will probably have to write some kind of specific classes that deal with all of that kind of stuff. And in particular, because obviously with the Switch, it has the touchscreen. You don't have to use the touchscreen. You don't have to support it. You can turn it off. But obviously people kind of, if it's a game that would benefit from the touchscreen, it's better to use it. So if you have that kind of thing, like I said, like the Unity will do weird stuff, so you have to kind of code around that a little bit, because you've got to support people basically using a controller and using the touchscreen and kind of being able to swap between them at a whim. You can't, and then the final sort of input point is that you can't rely on the touchscreen, because obviously, although 50% of people use their Switches handheld, that leaves 50% of the people that use it docked, or weird people that use their Switches docked. So obviously, when you've got your Switch docked, you can't rely on the touchscreen at all. So there is actually one of the ways that you can fail Nintendo's lock check is by having a bit of the main game where the player has to use the touchscreen. You can have it on like a side bit of game content. So for example, if your game has like mini games, you can have a mini game that requires the touchscreen, but you can't have it on like the sort of core gameplay content. You have to be able to play through from start to finish in the core game without any touching. Stop touching the screen. And then the kind of final porting point is performance. So if your art style is entirely dependent on like a really expensive full screen shader effect, you might find that the Switch starts chugging. If you have a game where you are layering a lot of sprites on top of each other, you might find the Switch chugging. If you have really high poly or texture count textures, you might find it chugging, etc., etc. The Switch is, as much as I love it, it's kind of a really posh mobile phone. So if you think of it in terms of that, in terms of performance, like if you have your game performing nicely, say on an iPad, it will work really nicely on the Switch. So yeah, you might find that there's some kind of like post effects and stuff that you end up needing to switch off. For example, ambient occlusion and depth of field and stuff like that seems to hit it really, really hard. And also, Unity UI is actually quite terrible once you start getting a lot of UI on the screen. Like it's really quite intensive. So, I don't know if you've played Subsurface Circular. It's basically like a text adventure game. There is a lot of text, and it kind of keeps a log of all of the conversation points that have happened, and it never clears them away, which is fine on PC, but again on Switch, once you get to around 100 conversation points, like 100 UI elements in a single kind of list, the performance really starts chugging whenever they start moving about. So we ended up kind of putting a cap on that. So that is ways that you can make porting easier for yourself. Very much regret doing the voice. How can I make my masterpiece even more attractive to switcheroos? See, I told you you would start using the word switcheroos. It's a really good phrase. The main one here, I think, is HD rumble. So the Switch has really, really nice rumble motors in it. There are, I think, 4 motors, a high and a low frequency on each side of the device. And you can play around with them and get really, really nice effects on them to do all kinds of crazy stuff. Pretty much every review for Subsurface Circular that kind of talked specifically about the Switch version of it mentioned the HD Rumble and said it was one of the best implementations of HD Rumble I'd ever seen. Thank you very much. But that like really stuck in like players' memories as well. Like kind of looking through Twitter, like lots of people kind of got like, oh yeah, the HD Rumble, because so it's a game that's kind of set on a train, so it rumbles away as if you're on a train. There are sort of 3 points of the HD Rumble stuff that we did on Subsurface. Firstly, we did really subtle physical feedback on any UI interaction. So when you press a button or move through the menus at all, there's like just the tiniest little rumble. Because again, you can do stuff like that on the Switch. Like you can't get that kind of stuff on the PlayStation or Xbox. So we do like this really tiny little rumble on it. The second thing, like I said, was the train rumble. So as the trains that the game is set on is moving around the place, we sort of mimicked like the kind of rumbling of like the lights coming past as you're pulling into the station and pulling out of the station. We kind of did like a lot of shaping of the rumble basically, so it's like you're kind of changing the intensity all the time, and you can do things where you end up with like sort of stereo effects, so it's like you move the rumble kind of across from one side of the device to the other. It's a really nice thing. And then kind of the last thing that we did that was really daft, but people seem to quite like it. So there are certain characters in the game that are set listening to headphones, and when you interact with them, like, so when you're sort of sat next to them, you can kind of hear their music quite muted. When you interact with them, the music kind of comes up to full volume. And we put a really simple beat detection on there when you were chatting to them, and timed some quite aggressive rumbling off of the beat detection, which, yeah, kind of people really liked. I think there's a thing with the Switch where it's like, because you can kind of hold it in your hands as a console, it's almost got like this kind of magic window kind of property to it. So like anything that you can do that helps sort of bring that world alive a little bit. Like, so we also did like some just daft camera movement stuff with the gyros. So as you're moving it around, like the camera's kind of interacting. And that was nice too. Some things to watch out for when you're doing HD Rumble stuff, and honestly, I'm not pleased with that heading of a slide, but I ran out of time, and that is what we're going to stick with. You need to make new settings for the Switch for the HD Rumble. If you use the same Rumble settings as the PlayStation 4 or the Xbox, I mean, it'll work, but it will be really horrible and too aggressive, and it'll feel sharp and it'll feel pretty bad. Like, there's a whole bunch of games on the Switch where you can tell, like, you can kind of tell when developers have done this, like, because things that should like be nice little gentle kind of effects are really not very nice at all. The rumble motors actually make a noise which yeah, if you're doing like quite a heavy rumble as well, like you can actually hear the noise of the motors. But even if you're doing like quite a little rumble, you can still hear the motors. We actually had a player got in touch with us about Subsurface Circular and said, when I click on buttons on the menu, even if I've got my headphones in the device, I can hear the UI, like I can hear like the little bleep from the UI. And we looked into it for about a day trying to figure out how that was happening before we realised that actually what he was hearing was like the kind of like the little rumble, like I say, we had like a gentle rumble every time we pressed the UI. So yeah, some of these bugs will just be players being idiots. Let people turn off the rumble. So again, because of the motor noise, because yeah, some of it can be quite noticeable. It's really good to let people turn off or adjust the rumble settings. So again, for Subsurface, because we had like these kind of three elements to it, we actually had it so you could turn the Rumble off completely, or you could just have the UI Rumble, or you could just have like the sort of world-building Rumble. So that was all that I have to say about HD Rumble. How we doing time-wise? Not bad. How long until I can release it? Remember, I am a genius coder. Well, even if you're a genius coder, there is going to be some stuff that will slow down your ability to release the game, even if you port it in 2 weeks. There's some pre-release timing stuff that you need to think about and need to be aware of. So like I said, binaries took us 2 weeks to port. It took another 6 weeks after we'd finished the port before it actually came out. Why, you might be wondering. I mean, very obviously I'm about to tell you why. So the first one is lot check. So that's Nintendo's sort of TCR, TRC pass, basically. They're very, like their lot check requirements aren't particularly harsh. They certainly don't have anywhere near as many as the other consoles do. And when you're kind of preparing your game to submit it, you kind of tick boxes of like, okay, these are the features that the game has, and then their website will actually generate you the lot check list that your game has to conform to based on the features that you said that you've got. Like I said, the website is really nice. Lot check takes about 3 weeks per round, give or take. There aren't any kind of like fast resubmissions. So for example, if you make just like one really basic but kind of critical lot check error, then you're going to have to submit a whole new version, and it is going to go through the whole 3-week process again. And your store pages also need approval. So yes, Nintendo, like separately from like the actual like ROM that you built, making your store pages, all needs approval. North America and Europe, and I assume Japan, all check their store pages independently. So you have to make like a different store page per territory. So yes, that can kind of slow you down. The EU team seem to be quite slow compared to the American one. And as far as I can tell, they kind of work in order based on release date. So the closer your thing is to coming out, like the closer your sort of preferred release date is, you'll probably get like a faster turnaround, whereas if your release date is quite far away, it actually might take them quite a while. You can make your store pages and set up your store pages while you're going through lot check, so you can kind of do these 2 bits at the same time, but your store page won't be approved until you've passed lot check. So you can get the whole thing and submit it, and then they'll come back with any changes that you need, but one of the changes will be also your game has not been approved yet. But that's fine. It just means that you can kind of do this stuff and make sure that there's nothing that's going to hold you up. Because, for example, there are things like the trailers that you have to have like certain kind of like idents at the start and at the end, and certain wording on the end slide, and America and Europe both have different wording that they need. And then kind of the final thing to be aware of with your release timing is that your press keys won't work until the game is kind of visible on the store as like a coming soon title. So if you, like I say, if you're one of the good indies that is sensible and does things like press outreach and tries to get reviews and all of that kind of stuff, you need to factor in that probably to line up your reviews, you will want the store page to be coming soon for probably, I don't know, 2 weeks, something like that, before the launch. Which so obviously it means things like Subsurface, like when they did the PC version of Subsurface, it was like a surprise release, and they literally just announced it and launched it at the same time. I mean, you can, like, technically you can do that with Switch, but you won't be able to get any pre-release reviews in that case. In general, I would aim for launching your game kind of 2 months after lot check. Will be like quite a comfortable kind of spacing. So if you take into account lot check, taking like 1 pass through lot check 3 weeks as well. So you're kind of looking at, okay, from the point where I finished my port, probably 3 months, something like 3 months is like a good kind of, it's generous, but it means that you've got the most amount of time and you're not kind of rushing stuff. So more things to think about with the storefront, with the eShop on the device. So yeah, as mentioned earlier, like I think the discoverability is kind of better than on any other platform. It's not perfect, and obviously with like a lot of titles coming out and stuff, you want to kind of maximize what things you can get and the number of different places that people can see your game. So the first thing is that they have like a new releases section on the store. It's the official store refresh date is on a Thursday, but you can basically, I mean, you can launch on pretty much any day that you want. The new releases section is ordered, like sorted by date, but then also by sales volume. So if you release on a day with loads of other games coming out, all of those games will be ordered on that page by how many copies they've sold, basically, which is actually quite a good way of seeing what's doing well. But yeah, so if you're not expecting your game to do kind of great guns and you know that there's other stuff coming out, you can kind of like, if you stick your game a day later, then you'll actually always end up the new releases thing from there. Nintendo have also recently created this Discover section on the storefront. I can't remember what it's called in America. This is like a mix of like old and new games, some DLC. There's a mix of indie stuff, AAA stuff, and each one's got like a little kind of reason why it's been picked by the store team. It's regional as well. Oh, I think yeah, and there's also like a game of the day kind of thing in there, and so it's regional. Like the American one is a separate list to the EU one, and these, because they're created by the store team, it's kind of like you need to reach out to Nintendo's team and make them properly aware of your game and how good your game is. Similarly, the device has a news feed on it. So as well as things like tweets and like official Nintendo tweets and official Facebook and all of that kind of stuff, there's a news feed directly on the device, and they highlight kind of like best releases of the week and all of that sort of stuff. And if you chat to Nintendo, you can get them to kind of to feature your game like in its own thing. So yeah, you really need to talk to Nintendo's like regional teams and kind of make them aware of your game and make sure that they're super happy with it. And the final kind of place where you can get found is that you can do sales discounts. Sales discounts are super easy for you to set up. They need to be approved, and there is a lead time on that. But yes, it's similar to kind of any store to sort of change. It has to get approved per region again. The discount section shows 60 titles and has a link to more titles. Up until recently, like the discount bit only showed 100 titles and didn't link to any others. So, for example, in the spring sale this year, there were more than 100 games on sale, so actually some people, their games were on sale, but also they weren't getting the added visibility from that. So you at least get that now. But it does mean, like, similar to other sort of things, it's like you've got to weigh up, okay, if I'm in the spring sale, there's maybe a bit of extra sort of push there, and people are maybe browsing the store at that point, but a lot of other games are on sale, so you've got to weigh up that kind of the hit to your discoverability. Unfortunately, there is no kind of like title connection stuff in the store. So, for example, if people like you as a publisher, there's no way of kind of going other games by this publisher, or people that bought this game also buy this game, and all of that kind of stuff. But I mean, there's always a chance that Nintendo will add that. I mean, because they are so within like the Switch has only been out for a year, and they are updating the store interface. Like I said, this Discover bit was new. The way the discounts work has changed. So yeah, hopefully like they'll update it and add some of that sort of stuff. There's also wish lists on the system, but the wish lists do basically nothing. They're really useless. So I'm kind of hoping that at some point they make wish lists work a bit like Steam, where it's like it will give you it'll ping you that something that you've got on wish list has gone on sale. I'm motivated by the joy of creation, not filthy capitalist money, and revisiting past games for commercial gain wounds my artistic soul. I see you're one of those indies. Well, if you're one of those indies that doesn't like revisiting your past title, I do Switch porting for indies. Hit me up if you want, and I can talk to you about maybe porting your game. That is the sales pitch at the end of the talk. And that is the end of the talk. Wait. So, yes, I think we've still got a bit of time. So if people have questions and stuff, that would be cool. Or if you don't have questions, that would be ideal for me. It is up to you. Yeah, sure. Have you got that? Oh, there's a microphone.
Commission wish lists don't work at all. Can you just describe that a little more? Because I wasn't actually familiar that was even a thing with wish lists.
Yes. So
how does it? What is it?
Yeah. So there is. So on a store page for a title, you can buy it or you can add it to your wish list. Players can go and if you click on your profile, you can see your wish list of all the games, and it'll tell you which ones of the games are on sale and stuff like that. But for example, if a game that's on your wish list enters a discount period, you don't there's nothing that kind of pings you about that. Or for example, you can wish list titles that are set up as coming soon, but when those actually get released, there's no kind of there's nothing either on device or it doesn't send you an email or basically anything. So the kind of at the moment the wish lists are barely functional. They exist, you can create a wish list, but yeah, they don't have the features that you probably expect. For example on Steam, where it emails you to say 100 titles that are on your wish list have just gone on sale. Oh, down front.
Yeah, so you said you're not much of a coder, but what exactly, can you give us a better idea of the extent to which you do have to dig into the code?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not, my profession is a designer. I mean, so in Unity, I mean, you have to do as much coding as you probably have to do in Unity anyway. There is certain stuff that you will have to do some actual proper coding. For example, videos don't play, you can't use Unity's default video player thing to show videos. There's a very specific way that you have to call videos through script. But there's example code for all of that sort of stuff on their website. So it's actually it's quite easy to copy and paste in and figure out how to kind of hook it up. But yeah, you will have to dig in and kind of get your hands dirty a little bit.
But so for your part, you just follow along with a lot of templates, largely?
Yeah, so like I said, they've got a lot of examples. I believe Unity have worked really closely with Nintendo to kind of get their engine actually sort of set up and nice so that people can use it fairly easily. Snipper Clips, which was a launch title, was built in Unity. So there's been quite a close relationship there. which has meant like the sort of the Unity bit of the developer forums is actually like quite active, and there's Unity, like a Unity staff are actually on there as well as Nintendo staff. But yeah, so it means like there's a lot of examples of stuff. So if you have set things up nicely in your project, fingers crossed, you won't have to do that much coding.
All right, thank you very much.
No worries. Cool, I think that is us then. Thank you very much for coming. Like and subscribe, or I think you'll get sent an email saying, tell Tony how awesome his talk was. So if you could do that, that would be great. Thanks very much.